Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
As the mist crawls over the Trent like a living thing, and the city ground stands there, hulking, ancient, a cathedral of noise and fear, you can almost hear the ghosts whispering in the stands, tales of great escapes, cursed referees, and last-minute goals that will rattle in the walls. Nottingham Forest versus Manchester United. Two names soaked in blood and glory. But under these Halloween skies, reputations mean nothing. Shadows grow long, hearts beat faster, and even the bravest players might find themselves looking over their shoulder, wondering what's lurking just behind them. The Red Devils come knocking, and Forest must decide, do they open the door or do they bolt it shut and pray the night passes without a scream? Welcome, brave souls, if you dare, to Talking Reds, the horror show. Now, no Richard the Blood Spray, unfortunately. He is currently sharpening his facts and data, and the stab man Danscape will be joining us shortly, but we do have Muttering prophecies from beyond reason, Raf The Raging Psycho, and myself presiding over this twisted circus of terror with a painted grin, myself, wide and wild, it's the clown of chaos, Greg Oram. Tonight we gather under the blood red moon to summon another fright night at the city ground, where Forest face the Red Devils, and only one side will live to tell the tale.
With the Brazilian lads, I'm teaching them about my voice, because I think they've heard a voice like this and look at me like, what is that? I've never met a man who's heard a voice like that before. With the Brazilian lads, I'm teaching them about my voice, because I think they've heard a voice like this and look at me like, what is that? I've never met a man who's heard a voice like that before. With the Brazilian lads, I'm teaching them about my voice, because I think they've heard a voice like this and look at me like, what is that? I've never met a man who's heard a voice like that before.
Well, we like to get into the swing of things with Halloween, don't we? And it's just Raf, the random psychos with us. Oh, and joining us, and Posferatu has entered the studio in the form of the ghastly Danscape. How you doing, guys? Raf, how you doing?
I'm doing well, mate. I'm doing well.
Excellent. And Dan behind the mask, how are you?
Good day, guys. I'm good, mate. I'm good. I've just been polishing my Europa League trophy. I don't know why it's not American.
Not quite sure what that accent is, but we love it. Listen, we've got all Halloween style. We like to try. We hoped Richard might be able to be with us, but unfortunately not today. So just us three in our ghastly Halloween styly. Let's get straight into it. Don't forget, if you are in the comments and one or two are with us already, please let us know that you're here. We'll try and put some comments up, give you guys some shout outs, and all the rest of it. Please hit like and subscribe. You know that it's really helpful for us. If you wouldn't mind liking the video, and 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts now, that would be great as well. Okay. Don't forget, Richard and I will be in the nav before the match on Saturday. I think Danscape's going to be floating in as well as maybe one or two others. So if you're around in Nottingham before the match, we'll be at the nav. Man United come calling then, Raf, on Saturday. What's your general thoughts on this one going into the weekend?
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag because you know, it's so Forest to just not know what to expect, which one of our teams turns up, what team of the opposition turns up, and so like anything's possible. But I've kind of got this vibe that it suits us when there's no expectation on us. Man United are on the up. we do actually perform well when they come to our gaff as well. And I think a week without a game with DWS, that's Dyche, Wone and Stone, really getting stuck into the lads is really key. And I really don't underestimate the fact that actually Murillo is back and he's had the week to get truly match fit. And it's really, well, Dan and I kind of look at stats. He looks at even more, but I've recently been looking at it, just the actual difference Murillo makes. And he did last season being in that defence, actually more incrementally than Milenkovic. And I think that's also why he might have been struggling, but I think we're on the up.
Fantastic. Danscape, general thoughts going into the weekend for Forest v Man United?
General thoughts are that it's still a tough game, but they are still this kind of weak side, mate. There's that side to them, especially away from home, that we can still get at. So I'm still thinking it's how we've played them pretty much every time we've beaten them. Is we take our chances and they crumble a bit. So I'm hoping it's the same again. I'm hoping the week on the training pitch galvanizes us and puts us into that position of being at home and thinking, right, everyone's behind us. We're going to go out. We're going to be solid. I'm going to keep them quiet, and then it's going to be a tight game that we nick it. But I think that's perfectly possible against this Man United side. It's just about dealing with their threats, I guess, as ever. And I think a solid week on the training ground with Dyche we'll know what they are and we'll have planned for it. So pretty optimistic, I suppose, considering our form generally is that this is a bit of a chance to show that we're on the up.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I came away from the match on Sunday feeling really low. I've got to be honest with you. Having watched a really frustrating performance, lots of long balls being hoofed up to Igor Jesus, and then when he went off, balls being hoofed up to Taiwo Awoniyi, and I thought, is this what we got to expect? I know that Dyche had only been in the building a few days, and I was getting excited about him being there. But sure enough, after the win against Porto in the Europa, I'm thinking, right, we've turned that corner and everything's going to be fine again. But obviously, it isn't as straightforward as that, is it? It's never going to be a 5-minute fix. It takes time. But Bournemouth really knocked me. They knocked my confidence. I come away thinking we're going to get relegated. If that team plays like that with that kind of endeavour and that kind of output, we're going to get relegated. And of course, that's how you feel in the moments after, and the 2.5-hour drive after stuck in traffic on the M25 didn't help. And by the time I woke up on Monday morning, obviously you feel a lot better, and you look ahead to the weekend. You look ahead to Man United coming, who are on the back of 3 wins, and I think is this a good time to play them or not? I think I'm more worried about us and what we have to offer and what we have to worry them rather than anything else. There's good players in our team. Nottingham Forest have got the best squad we've said that they've assembled in a long time, and many have said Sean Dyche has got the best players at his disposal that he's possibly ever had. It's all about it coming together now. So with a week together from Sunday through until kickoff on Saturday, who knows what that week's been like, with him saying, I'm going to have them in on Monday. They're not as fit as I want them. So in many ways, they're not fit enough for how he wants to play. The Wone and Stone effect only goes so far. It's a feel-good factor more than anything else. I guess, can we peel back between the surface? I mean, their coaches. I mean, Wone is his assistant manager per se. Steve Stone is one of his coaches. Can we peel back the layers a little bit and find out about their coaching? We know about Dyche, but they come as a 3, really. So are all 3 of them on the same page? How much do they have conflict? How much do they say, well, I think we should be doing this, and I think that player should be playing? I don't know. I'm just kind of putting those questions out into the ether a little bit. These are the things that are kind of going around in my mind. Dyche clearly seems to be I'm the manager, this is my way, this is what I want. And I think clear messaging is really important for footballers. So yeah, my thoughts going into this one is I just don't know. I'm still at the stage where I just don't know on what's going to happen. I really hope that we get more of the Porto performance than we did anything else, like the Bournemouth one. We're at home and we're going to get into team selection as we go through this episode. But Raf, I wanted to ask you about Morgan Gibbs-White, because his interview yesterday, I'm not sure if you saw it. I didn't clip it up to put up, but it was along the lines of a bit of almost like a bit of a loving for Man U. We know he's a Man United fan as a kid, but he was asked questions. I mean, I've looked at the whole interview, and I think maybe as well as more context required. But he was asked about Man United's recent form, and he called it incredible, and it's what the Premier League had been missing. Did you see that, and what did you make of it?
I think it's very easy, and there's too much of this in society at the moment, of clipping something up and taking it out of context. And the thing that's going around X is just such sensationalism. It's ridiculous. Players get asked about the opposition the entire time before games. You don't say, oh, the opposition are total shit. This is going to be super easy, right? You don't do that. We never have done that. And that never happens in presses whatsoever, right? So the fact that you're talking up, and Man United have suddenly started winning, right? And to go, well, look, they've started winning, and it's not it's a fact. They don't have Europe. They had a pre-season. They've still had the same manager, and he's just pointing to, do you know what? That's what stability probably does for you. Eventually, they are turning the corner. And I think probably in context, he goes, look, we've got Daishin. This is now what we're trying to achieve, is actually getting that stability and turning the corner. So I don't find it as horrendous as everyone seems to be. And the pitchforks are out, and they seem to want to literally lynch him and burn him at the stake. But as much as I'm not impressed with Morgan Gibbs-White on the pitch at the moment, I think that's one step too far and taken out of context.
What about you, Dan? Did anything that he had to say Q in any way?
No, I mean, I saw it, and I agree with Raf. I think the trouble with Gibbs-White is he's become the pantomime villain, hasn't he? Because of the way, sort of, partly because of the way he is anyway, but mainly because of what happened in the summer, right? It was always going to be a season where it could have gone either way with him, of being like, right, he's now our sort of hero, or he could become a bit of a villain if he's not on form. And it's almost like people are now looking for these kind of things to sort of have a bit of a dig at him. So it's either, he shouldn't be captain, or his form's rubbish at the minute, or now it's this kind of thing. And I just think it's sometimes you can't control all of that. Once the rumors came out in the summer, obviously, about, the clause and the potential that he was leaving and all that, the only way he could turn that round is if the team was doing well and he was part of that. And so now that the team isn't doing well and he's not sort of performing, it just all is kind of, it's a bit OTT when it's the only way out of this is for our players to get confident and want to play for this club even more and deliver it, not to have a go at them and kind of, that sort of stuff. So I think it's a bit daft looking for it. Yeah, we know he's a Man United fan. Using the word incredible and all that is just what he does. Like every interview he does, he says stuff's incredible. And he called Midtjylland thingy, and that didn't work either. So he could have said that about Man United. He could have just called him thingy. And that, it's just an interview. It's kind of like you're under pressure. Happens to us on the podcast, whatever. You get asked a question you're not prepared for, you just say stuff, and it's not always exactly what you mean or thought about in this big context that everybody else then thinks about it as, right? Everybody else is applying all their context to it, and he was just answering questions in the moment. So I don't really, Dan
makes a very good point there, and I think the Midtjylland interview kind of proved what some of us have been thinking for a while, is the fact that he's not a natural interviewer. He has a lot of natural nervousness about him in front of the camera. And I do think, best laid plans of maybe what is in his head just start going on autopilot and things come out of his mouth. And I don't think it's intentional. I just think he's very, very nervous in front of the camera, as many of us are.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you both have summed it up quite well as where I'm at. I think he could have chosen different words, but like Dan says, in the moment you perhaps say the first thing that comes into your mind and you're trying to pick the right words, and it maybe comes out a little bit kind of off where you wanted it to go. But I think the second part of the interview that maybe hasn't been looked at is he's talking about, look, he talks about Forest, what we've got to do and what we have to try and overcome. And, there's nothing wrong with saying, look, your opposition are in good form. I think his words maybe got a bit muddled, and I think you both summed it up quite well there. And any kind of meltdown is just a little bit going studs up on a player at the moment who has really kind of disappointed lately in terms of his form. Okay, guys, in the comments, what I'd love you guys listening and watching to do is to let us have your Nottingham Forest players or managers, past and present, in their Halloween form. So let's have your play on words for Morgan Gibbs Fright, for example, or Callum Hudson-Odoi. Let's get your best ones in the comments, and we'll read some of them out. A week with the players, as I said, Raf. How important going into this Man United game is it that Sean Dyche and his coaching team had that kind of clear week with the Forest players?
I'm hoping absolutely massive. I did, however, I'll hold my hand up, and I actually said ahead of the Chelsea game, it's massive that Ange just got 2 weeks with the players ahead of Chelsea, and that made absolutely no difference whatsoever. So, yeah, there's limits to a week being miracles to work, but I do think it's very, very important for, I just think, goal setting and a lot of recalibration of the player's mentality, I think, is quite key. And reminding, without borrowing a Trumpism, making Forest great again. Just remember what you did last year, channel some of that, and let's get back to that at its core, at its basics. So I do think it's important. Some people were questioning them being brought in when they were obviously quite knackered. Sorry, Gary Birtles. Yes, they are a little bit tired. And going straight into training for the next 2 days after the game day, when they're usually kind of rest days. I think it's quite important they had their mentality changed. Then they got their rest day on the Wednesday. So on their rest day, all of that information is percolating in their brain and reinforcing ahead of it. So for me, I'm very excited. It's not an international break, so all the players are there to be able to do something tactically, unlike the international breaks. So that's another massive positive. And oh my gosh, if there's common sense, can Elliot Anderson please be given just 2 days off or something, just to get his conditioning back to being able to then play 2 games a week again very soon.
Fantastic. Bobby Franco gives us our first Forest player in a Halloween form, Ibrahim Sangori. That's very good, I have to say. Obviously, Ibrahim Sangori. Ibrahim Sangori. Very good, Bobby Franco. Thank you very much. Danscape, comment if you want to on the week with the players and how important that is. But thinking about key players like Morgan Gibbs-White, bringing him up again, we mentioned in the pod we did a couple of days ago about is he now entering into the phase of being droppable, or is his form going to mean that he gets left out of the team? Where just kind of remind us where you're at with this game coming up. You know, is he too much of a big game player to be left out? Is it too early in the Dyche era for Dyche to make a statement and drop Morgan Gibbs-White, do you think?
I think it is. I just think he's a Dyche player. That's the thing. So I think, you know, it would be hard for Dyche to imprint what he wants to do on the team, whilst also, you know, dropping Gibbs-White for somebody else, because eventually Gibbs-White comes back into it, and I sort of think you've got to practice and deliver what you want to do. So it would be a tough one. I have been thinking, like, ahead to the team selection, that it might be a different role for him that we need to try for this particular game, especially because I think his best moments have been his final ball, as opposed to his sort of deeper, you know, contribution so far this season. So we'll come on to that with the team lineup. So I think maybe he might look at a slightly different role in this game. And we know that central midfield setup can change. You know, we've seen Gibbs-White play very deep against some teams, and, you know, much more as a traditional kind of 10 or even the second striker at times. So that's what I suppose Dyche has got to work out, is how to get the best out of him and not overcomplicate the game. There is a side to it where, you know, you start to... He didn't have a good pre-season, did he, right? In terms of, he didn't have the same amount of time with the squad as everyone else, and presumably he didn't have the same amount of fitness and focus, and he's had the family stuff and the contract stuff. There has been quite a lot that I think we are seeing the effects of with him, you know, the little bit of sloppiness and stuff in his form. So I think that is true. It's just I don't see how Dyche builds a team without him in it. And I suppose the week on the training ground bit for me, you don't really get fit in a week, right? You just don't. Like a couple of days of running doesn't suddenly make you fitter than you were the week before. It takes 6 weeks and it takes years of constant fitness work to get much fitter. So I sort of find that a strange one from a manager at this stage of the season, because it'll take you another 6 weeks before you see the results of that, which is fine to work on, but it's not going to be the difference between what we did at Bournemouth and what we do at Man United, I don't think, against Man United. It's going to be more about getting the players focused and knowing their jobs, I suppose. And I think that's what Gibbs White needs a bit of as well. Not trying to solve all of our problems, just focus on his role and let other people do theirs, I think.
Okay. A few shout outs to Binit Patel, says hello from Doha. Good to have you with us, Binit. Thanks very much for joining us. Damon Hazel says, good morning, Hope. We are all up for a win on Saturday. That was a comment that came in really early. I think Damon says he's going to be in the nav beforehand as well. Tim Shipman says, morning, afternoon, everyone. Gibbs White to be rested. Thoughts on his comments about United? Well, we've covered that a little bit already. Yes, I was kind of putting my makeup, which is why we were a little bit late, Brucey, but it was more like trying to get the master fit as well. Steve says we could do with Tuchel ringing and saying if he wants a place in the England squad, then he start putting the performances. That's Gibbs White, I think. He thinks that's his best motivation at the minute. Also, Darren Waplington says, good afternoon, guys, from the A50 services. He says, if we're going to the NAV pre-match, he's going to look forward to seeing us. Well, we will be in the NAV pre-match. Big Iron's going to be in there for breakfast at 10 and Baby Guinness is on the bar. Danscape's trembling already. Wake Up News says changes have to be made, especially with Sells possibly being dropped for the corner fiasco. Also, Pat Brett, after Bournemouth, the only horror show is Forest's form. We don't see him up for a scrap. Could be true. Graham Hedworth wants to know about Dyche, Brown and Stone. See Everton and how David Moyes improved them. Not sure about that. They're sitting in 14th, lost 3-0 on Sunday. Form is up and down a little bit, so I kind of we'll have to wait and see on that one, if I'm honest with you. And then one final one from our friend Will at WT Analysis. No need for a pun. Doesn't get much scarier than Matt Turner. Boom, boom. All right, let's think about Man United. Let's think about our opposition. Let's get our scouting report.
Send them back to East London! We send them back!
I hope anybody's not stupid enough to write us off.
Okay, let's take a look at our opposition coming to the City Ground on Saturday.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, mate. Well, gosh, where do we start? Well, the good news is that if we just take a quick step back, yes, we all know that Man United are on an uptick of form. It's carried them up to 6th. They've got 16 points. When we look at our measly haul of 5, that is quite a massive difference. But as we kind of going to get into, I don't think the gulf is actually as large as that points difference makes it out to be. The good news about Amorim's sides are the fact that we know exactly how he's going to play, because he's made it very clear that he is never going to change formation. So for those that just need a bit of a reminder, that means that you're going to have a goalkeeper. That's Lamens, he's going to be in goal. And then you're going to have a back 3 effectively, or it's kind of a back 5 with wing backs, but you've got a back 3. And you've got De Ligt, who seems to be kind of a mainstay, and also Shaw, who's also a mainstay on that left-hand side. Now, I would say that Martinez probably would be their starter, but in the absence of him, and he still is going to be out for next game, you've got Maguire, who's been tried out there, and Euro that's been tried out there. But it'll be one of those two that probably fills in that back 3 element of the back 5 as the centre-backs. You are going to have, definitely I would say, because they're fit and there's no real change, Diallo on the right-hand side and he's not really a wing back, I would say. He's more of a winger, and that presents some opportunities. And then you've got Diallo on the right hand side, Diallo on their left, going up their left hand side. Okay. Then in the middle of the park, they've again got stability. And what I've been trying to explain to people is Fernandez is a fantastic footballer. It's like pushing Morgan Gibbs White and making him play with his skill sets in the 8. Okay. It's going to do 90% of the job, but it's not where he naturally wants to play. Fernandez is a 10, but he's playing in that 8 role at the moment. Next to a bit of a resurgent Casemiro. And Casemiro was pretty much the butt of everyone's jokes last season, but he's had actually a half decent start to this season, and been a lot of what has been right about their resurgence over the last 5 games. Up the top, they are going to probably now run with their 3 massive signings, which is Mbeumo, Cunha, those 2 in the 10 that sit behind Sesko, who's going to be their lone striker. They've had stability. Their injuries are virtually nothing. I've mentioned Martinez, who's definitely out. Maguire and Mount would be key subs off the bench, you would think. They are probably going to start. There's 25% chance, I'd say, that they're injured for this game. But otherwise, they are at full strength. And if we have a look at it, of their, how have they got to where they've got to? They've had 3 wins on the bounce. That was going backwards in time. So most recently, Brighton at home, Liverpool away, Sunderland at home. They lost to Brentford away. They beat Chelsea at home, and they lost to Man City away. Okay, so it's a good mixed bag in there of actually quite high-flying teams. Even Sunderland are flying at the moment. So they're managing to grind out results, but their performances are not always absolutely fantastic. What I've started to try and do from this week onwards is overlay in the last 3 games. You've got Brighton, for those that are watching, and for those listening, I'll explain it. Brighton's the most recent game on the left, then Liverpool in the middle, then Sunderland. We've got the goal scorers and the assists. So with Brighton, you've got 2 goals off of Mbeumo. You've got another goal off of Cunha. So you've got 3 goals out of those 10 spots sitting behind Sesko. Sesko's chipping in with an assist to those 10s that are running past him. And then you've got Casemiro with a goal and an assist, and Shaw with an assist. Okay. You've got at the Liverpool game, you've got goals then for Mbeumo, and you've got an assist out that midfield. Diallo coming down their right-hand side and Fernandez in the middle of the park. Maguire's chipping in with a goal, which he made a massive song and dance about afterwards as well. Basically saying claim the win was all him. And then from midfield, even when you've got Mount who's coming in and filling in for injuries, when Cunha wasn't fit, he's still chipping in with a goal. Sesko's getting a goal, so he's not just a mobile kind of false 9. He is scoring goals. And Mbeumo's not just scoring goals, but he's got an assist. So that's against Sunderland. So that's where we are. And this is kind of what I'm going to get onto is if you have a look at their assist chart, they've got 10 players in the Premier League that have assisted goals, but not a single person has got 2 assists. There's 10 of them that have got 1 assist, which is a bit problematic because it's not like you can just shut down one threat of creativity. But it does highlight the fact that you'd expect Fernandez to be a lot higher up there. But because he's been pushed into that 8th role, he is a tiny bit less effective, but he is still their top scoring SofaScore score of a 7.27. And he's top of their performance rankings averaged over the season thus far. If you have a look at Fernandez's heat map, it is everything you expect from him. You have just got red all over the pitch. Okay, not so much actually box crashing, but he is operating between the 2 boxes and he's absolutely everywhere. Left, right, up, down, middle, absolutely everywhere. So it is key, even though his numbers and he's not chipping in with as many, he's got 2 goals, 1 assist. So he's doing a little bit of damage, but it's about what he's actually creating to release the top 3 to do their damage. Cunha's been injured, so he hasn't got as much red on the heat map, but you can definitely see he keeps himself up and down that left-hand side, but can actually operate kind of floating like we saw with Alanga a little bit behind Sesko, the striker, and having a bit of that damage from being able to track him. Buemo's been a bit more classic from that perspective of on the right-hand side, but you can see how much box threat he's got. Huge amounts of red on the right-hand side of that box, all around the right-hand side corner of that box. And he is super, 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 super attacking. And also waiting on that centre circle, like we've seen with quite a few strikers, of just waiting for the break and using his speed with which to break on the counter. As when it comes to the goal scorers, main threat, and he's the key person for me, it is Mbeumo who we need to keep locked down. So depending on how we're going to deploy, but my guess is Nico's going to be on the left-hand side. Oh, poor Nico, but he is our best player at the moment. He's got another massive assignment, again, trying to keep Mbeumo absolutely quiet as much as possible. But have a look at Casemiro very quickly as the last thing, okay? So Casemiro has got 2 goals and an assist, okay? That's as much as Fernandes this season. And he is 3rd on their chart with exactly 7 score on SofaScore average. So it's got Fernandes on 7.27 and Mbeumo 7.19 and Casemiro at 7 as their 3 players that are above there. Final thing I would just say is, context-wise of them, are they really playing super well? Well, if you have a look at SofaScore and having a look at the teams that are around them, so 2 above and 2 below. So you take your Sunderland, Villa, Man City, Liverpool, right? And those are their kind of the 4 teams around them. Liverpool have only got 1 player that is ranked 7 and above. City have got 4, Villa have got 5, Sunderland have got 5. Ignoring Liverpool are a bit of a basket case. And I think slots heads all over the shop at the moment. But the teams around them have got more form players. So it's less about shutting down a couple of people, and it's just around that. But I don't think if we can handle Mbeumo, handle Fernandes, I do think that is most of their threat extinguished. But they haven't been playing lights out like the teams around them. So that's where I really am about Man United.
Thank you very much indeed. Alrighty. So if you are watching along, this is Talking Reds. If you're listening, thank you for joining us on your podcast. It might be Apple, it might be Spotify. Go ahead and give us a 5-star review if you can. Also, please remember that we are sponsored by The Cheese Trader. Stu Freestone in York. He's a Forest fan and he takes orders online. You can go and see him in store. You can quote Talking Reds, get 10% off every time. All the details are in the bio. Stu Freestone, The Cheese Trader. All right. So we are in the middle of our Halloweenish episode. We've had a spooky look at the opposition coming to town at the weekend. And let's see if we can kind of add some more context to that with a little bit of this.
I'm a scat man. Pedrinha Moraes fazendo som, fazendo som. Pedrinha Moraes fazendo som, fazendo som. E Pedrinha Moraes fazendo som.
Alrighty, Danscape, let's see what you got.
Thank you very much. I have got a little bit on Man United, then I'm going to look at kind of dice ball very quickly, what we might expect, which again might be what we know, but just to show you the journey. Quickly on Man United, a couple of bits that stand out on their season so far. So, you know, performing quite well, but they stand out very much as a counter-attacking team these days, which is something you might not expect from a Man United side. That's where they probably at their best is exploiting that space with their particular formation. One thing we probably won't like is that they're out shithousing us so far this season at 51% to our 36, which is completely the wrong way around for what we should have from last season. And they're outperforming us on set pieces. So another team that's doing pretty well from set plays at the minute, albeit I'll come on some positive signs on that, I think, against Bournemouth, despite the goal we conceded. On the right-hand side, you'll see that their usual frailties are still kind of there. Like the goalkeeping score is not that good. Finishing's not that good. Defending their box, don't score that highly for that. What they've improved is the chances and the box crashing and the playmaking because they've got Cunha and Mbeumo, really. So that's what I'm saying. Some of the vulnerabilities are still there with them that on our day we can exploit. In terms of their season, comparing the same games last season to this season, they're 1 point better off, but they've actually scored 2 fewer goals than they did against the same fixtures last season. And their defense is bang on the same. So the end result is kind of similar. But what they have done is they've created a hell of a lot more chances this season, right? So they've created 5 more goals worth of chances across the 9 games so far. But then they've also missed 6 goals more worth of chances as well. So like that's where the finishing is still actually off. They should almost be doing better than they have been doing, despite being in good form, if they were taking more of their chances. So again, there's still that opportunity for us, I think, in the game. In terms of home and away form, I thought it was quite interesting. They are very much a team that's performing better at home. So on the left, you've got the expected goals scored. So if you go left to right on that chart is your home form, and top to bottom is your away form. So you can see at home, they're ranking in that top 25% for chance creation, but away from home, they're in the bottom half, right? So stronger at home than away. And then on the right-hand side is the defensive side of it, the expected goals against, and that's where you really see the difference. In the home, they're in that top sort of 20% of teams for their defensive underlying numbers, but away from home, they're right at the bottom, like one of the worst sides on here since 22-23 in terms of the chances they give away. So obviously with them coming to the City ground, that is a good sign. We're kind of, in that mix, I suppose slightly better away than at home so far this season defensively, funnily enough, despite some of the results. But I think that a lot of that comes down to the Chelsea game as well. So that's a quick look at home and away. Players wise, I mean, the standout player for them is probably Mbeumo, really, in terms of numbers, in terms of being that impact number 10 kind of player that's crashing the box and really delivering the results. Fernandes is always good as a kind of playmaker. He's always been good since he's been there. And then defensively, it's kind of a mix in terms of the wing backs are what stand out for them. They are quite good at playing that role of wing back. So I think that's probably the area of danger for us that we have to deal with our formation. And then Seshko's actually doing not a bad job of being a target man, I would say. But again, it's not necessarily getting into the spots to finish off his chances. So then, just looking at the dice ball scenario. So what I looked at is the teams basically comparing the percentage of passes that they play as long passes compared to the amount of possession they have as a team, right? So if you're on the bottom left of this chart, you are a very direct team because you don't have much of the ball and a lot of your passes go long. And you'll see down the bottom there are 2 teams that have sort of highlighted slightly. So Forest from last season, right? So ranking at 75% for the amount of passes we play long and bottom 10% for the possession we have. But then you'll see Everton from 23-24 are even more in the bottom right-hand corner than that, right? So one of the teams that play the most percentage of long balls that there's been again since 22-23, since we were promoted, but also a team that doesn't have much possession. And I suppose the red line I've drawn on is the difference from what we've been trying to do in the top left, where we've been trying to mix it with Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City and Liverpool, and the journey we've got to make, which presumably we'll see on this chart if I bring it up, it will be that we sort of slide down there towards that position back where we were last season as the season goes on, if we're going to play in a kind of a traditional Daesh style, I guess. And similarly, I suppose one difference that we will see though from last season is the pressing side of it and the tackle position, which I think we sort of mentioned last time. But it's a case of where, yes, he plays the long ball side of the game, but when you look at the bottom to top on this chart, which is average tackle position, Forest last season are actually off the bottom of the chart, right? They are literally one of the deepest teams there's been in my data for the average position where they tackle the opposition. So then you go up the chart and you'll see Palace this season are playing quite a similar style of game. Fulham play quite a similar style of game. West Ham, with a bit of Nuno and a bit of Potter in there. But what we've been doing this season on the top left is, again, we've been trying to play that really high pressing game in the mix of Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City. And what you see with Everton in that 23-24 season is they're actually in the middle, though. They're not, they weren't the kind of team that would completely sit off and play what you'd call the complete low block. So it will be somewhere in the middle. Again, we'll sort of slide down that chart, you would presume, to become more of a long ball team, but still quite a high intensity sort of pressing side, which might come back to the fitness chat. And just a couple of bits from that Bournemouth performance which reinforced some of that. So this is our last 6 games, and the percentages are all the sort of rankings of where those games sit. So if you look at the Bournemouth game, for example, the percentage of passes we played long in that game ranks it in the top 15% of our games since 22-23. And if you look at the rest of our season going back along the right, we've had a lot of our lowest numbers in that respect. So that's Dyche ball straight into effect against Bournemouth. But what is some positive signs on the defensive part of this chart at the bottom is the expected goals against actually scores quite high for that game, right? So non-penalty expected goals against was actually a good defensive display. As much as we didn't like what we saw, we returned to a green box on that. If you go towards the average tackle position, again, it was a green box, right? So we are pushing on a bit more in that respect, albeit we've done that this season, but we continued that. And then the other ones at the bottom are actually probably the key signs of a Dyche team that we're hoping to get is our box vulnerability, i.e. how often teams get into the box, having had the ball in the final third, improved, right? It went right back into a top 20% performance. Our dual win rate was quite high, despite not necessarily looking like that. And our set piece vulnerability, and this sounds ridiculous, but actually when you think about it, they didn't really create much from their other set pieces, did they? Apart from the corner that goes straight in the goal. But actually the rest of it, I feel like, according to the numbers, I can't remember every set piece they had, but according to the numbers, we actually did, improve the ability of stopping those teams turning their set pieces into shots on goal. So there are some good signs.
Okay. Thanks very much for that. So a quick question, Dan, is Dyche teams at home versus how Dyche sets his teams up away, because Dyche at home against Porto was one thing, Dyche away at Bournemouth was very much a different thing altogether. Is there a difference that you've noticed, or can you recall in looking, or maybe from the eye test? It feels to me like he's got a very deliberate way of setting up away from home, but obviously my litmus test is very limited.
I'll be honest, it's not. I haven't looked at it in terms of like all the numbers. I remember when I looked at the results he got when he took over from Frank Lampard at Everton, that first half of a season that he had. I mean, his wins were 1-0 wins at home that season, right? I think he got one away win, might have been the Brighton one where they beat him like 5-1. But I think at home, it's very much, he just went back to basics. It was a 1-0, let's get a 1-0 home win, get the points on the board and do it that way. So I think his home setup to start with will be as conservative as you might think an away team would be.
Raf, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually. And looking at what Dyche, like, again, might be just the away way of doing it, but it's really interesting that we defend our box starting to like we did last time and just take away the risk around our box. But built into that is if we've got the ball around our box, get it up the field. It's that phraseology of tactical space, right? Of just get the ball up the other end of the pitch, but press really, really high. So it's like in rugby doing a massive kick long and everyone pushing up and then scrummaging around the ball and keeping it up their end of the pitch, as it were, and try and nick it back, but cause all of the risk. If we can win the ball from a high long ball, great, we're up the pitch super quickly and unsettling them. If not, try and win the ball back super, super quickly up there, but do all of that danger work away from our own box. And I don't actually mind that as a strategy. Yeah, if we become very good at dueling and very good at winning second balls. What we were terrible at Bournemouth was winning second balls. But what Dyche's famous for is winning second balls. So as soon as we can start winning the second balls, that strategy actually starts working and de-risking the team, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. A couple more in the comments. Callum Horror Adoy from Brucey and Holla Aina. Bobby Franco's back. He's on a roll. Nicolo Skeletona, Draculus Louise, and Damn Indy. Oh man, I tell you guys are cracking me up. Let's get more of your play on words, Forest style Halloween in the comments. Mark has dipped in his pocket with a £2 donation. Thank you, Way NFFC. Really appreciate that. We thank you very much. And we will see you in the Nav on Saturday for definite. Thank you very much to you, Mark. All right, we are going to have a look at our team selection and who that might be. Let's bring up the FOT mob. Let's make it a bit bigger. This is quite a tough one, so I'll kick things off with kind of where I'm at in terms of a team. It is really difficult to think about picking a different team than the one that started against Bournemouth, and that's what's on the screen for those that are listening and can't see what's in front of us. Nico Williams at left back, Savona at right back, Murillo Milenkovic in the centre back pairing, Matt Sells in goal, obviously. A midfield two of Anderson and Louise, Hudson-Odoi on the left, Dan Ndoye on the right, Morgan Gibbs-White in the 10, and Igor Jesus up top. And that's a 4-2-3-1 that I, if I'm honest with you, struggle to break that apart, because as much as I didn't like the performance against Bournemouth on Sunday, this was the team, barring the Savona Zinchenko switch that we know about, that did play well against Porto. And so I'm kind of feeling that we might just go again. I'm not sure that I can make a case to change that, if I'm honest with you. I mean, Chris Wood being fit, if he is fit, could be the change that goes up top, but that's really dependent on fitness. Let's suggest that he's still not fit, so therefore it's Igor Jesus. James McAtee is a player that's been mentioned for not being in any of the last two squads and having had limited minutes from all three managers at Nottingham Forest this season. And so is it likely that he's going to come into the starting 11? I say it's unlikely. I'd like to see him on the bench. Maybe Amari Hutchinson might push for a start. Maybe Callum Hudson-Odoi drops out and Dan Ndoye moves over to the left, and maybe Amari Hutchinson comes in on the right. So there you go. That's what I'll do. I'll make that switch, kind of like just as a token switch, really, that Amari Hutchinson comes into the 11. I do think that he's been lively, and I do think that we need to start employing him in terms of minutes and in terms of getting his confidence up. But the midfield two of Anderson and Douglas Luiz, if fit, should play. There is, of course, the argument to go to a 4-3-3, and therefore you might see an Anderson, Luiz, and Ibrahim Sangare, and Gibbs-White moving out to a right side of a three, potentially. But look, my team would be the 4-2-3-1 with Nico, Murillo Milenkovic, Savona, Anderson, Luiz, Ndoye, Gibbs-White, Hutchinson, and Igor Jesus. Again, wouldn't surprise me if it's unchanged. Danscape, I come to you next. What are you thinking?
I think Danscape's just popped off.
He's just disappeared. Didn't notice that. Raf, I'll come to you. What are you thinking?
All right, so it's really interesting because there is no doubt we know how they're going to set up. Okay, so we're going to be battling two in the midfield, but we are going to have both of their fullbacks acting like wingers and making it effectively a midfield four. It presents opportunity, and this is where we're going to go on the mindset of going on the front foot and saying, well, that's an opportunity because there are holes either side of their back three for us to exploit. But we could do that potentially with the ball, turn over the ball and get behind it. So there is a part of me which says, right, we basically play 4-4-1-1, as it were, to be able to counter man for man. And this is where Dan Ndoye actually has got a super engine, and his defensive side has done a lot better. But I don't rate Hutchison to be able to do that side of it as well. It's a bit of a challenge, though, of what do you then do? Because, well, to be fair, you could actually put Gibbs-White on the right-hand side and Hutchison through the middle as a better tackler. But, I mean, we're talking low bar because Gibbs-White isn't a great tackler. Back was injured. It might be Callum, but Callum also is not a great tackler. I don't really want to go Nuno style and start getting Dominguez then on one of the wings just to be able to, for horses to courses. And I think that's too defensive. The other thought process I've got then is actually, as long as they don't switch the ball too much, we do go to a 4-3-3 because you can have three in midfield, two deal with Casemiro and and Fernandez, and then whichever side they've got threat on, the other. So if you've got Sangare in the middle, then either Ando goes across so that our fullback doesn't get double teamed by their wing back and their left or right hand side 10, or Louise does the same thing going the other direction. And a part of me actually fancies that a bit more, because it also means the fact that it frees up our wingers more, especially on the counter, to one, pin back their wing backs so they can do less of that marauding down because they're worried about what we've got on the threat. But also it means that we can super turn over the ball and attack into the spaces. So ideally for me, it would be, it's a quite, do you know what? Sangare for his distribution and quick through balls, a Yates to wind up Fernandez and get him booked and potentially get him sent off, or even Casemiro, because we've seen Casemiro's got a massively short fuse on him as well. So it could be Yates, or Dominguez is now back and he is super pressing. It could be any one of those three, and I'm happy with any one of those three in that middle section, right? But you've got Anderson and Douglas Luiz that need to be on either side to go and firefight left and right with marauding wing backs. It would be Savona on the right-hand side, Williams on the left-hand side, Eminem, Sells isn't dropped for me. And then if we do this, it would be Jesus up front. And I think it is... Hutchison for me starts. He's the most progressive. He really attacks with the ball. He deserves more of a shot. I'd start Callum over Dandoy. Just as a more attacking option, Callum's offered more going forward. Dandoy is slightly more defensive. I know that sounds weird, but in his recent performances, that's what I'd do, I think.
Okay, so you're leaving Gibbs White out of your team. I think you made a case for that previously.
Yep.
No problem.
Unless, Hutchison on one wing and you have Hud. Do you know what? You could actually have Morgan on the left-hand side. Fair. All right. Have Morgan on the left-hand side, because if there is that space for him to operate, especially behind Diallo, who's going to be vacating the entire time attacking, Morgan can actually redeem himself and cause chaos. For England, he plays off the left-hand side. He has done previously when he gets on for England. Maybe that's how you get him in, and actually he might be quite effective then crossing in for Jesus.
Okay, Danscape's on a work call. He's messaged me to say he'd go 4-1-4-1. And he'd have Gibbs White on the right-hand side. I'm not quite sure how the rest is being made up, but I'm assuming he's bringing Sangare in to kind of be that one at the bottom of the pitch, of the base, with a Douglas Luiz and an Anderson. I mean, I don't know that it's Hutchinson on the left. I'm going to put Callum Hudson-Odoi back in. I'm speaking for Dan, but he's going 4-1-4-1. Again, looking to have that kind of deeper anchor point.
It's interesting. That's what Dyche says in his masterclass. Is we're talking small margins here of what that is and what a 4-3-3 is. That is literally Louise and Anderson moving a tiny bit down, and Hudson-Odoi and Gibbs White moving a tiny bit up, and that turns into 4-3-3.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, right. So there's an idea of what it might be in terms of team selection. We will have to wait and see what Sean Dyche decides to do. I posed a question on the last podcast and I put it out to the Twitter sphere, and I was asking about Edu and the impact of Edu. And the question is, apart from Ange Postecoglou, because obviously that was the most recent cock-up, is Edu Gaspar the biggest backfire in recent memory? And I asked that question really just to kind of see what responses might be. And I'm asking it thinking, well, look, I'm putting this as part of the kind of the debate. Had there been no employment of Edu, would Nuno still be the manager? And would we be underway with the season that we thought we were going to have? You know, was bringing Edu in Marinakis' eyes, you know, the big way to step forward as a club and go into the upper echelons? And has that backfired on Marinakis? I asked Twitter to get involved, and Dave Holmes said it's hard to tell when we don't actually know what his remit is. Other than the clash with Nuno, where reports suggest Nuno was more the agitator. Admittedly, without any additional context, recruitment has been solid, and it didn't sound like Edu was too involved in hiring Ange. Is it a case that is an easy target for people who don't want to openly criticise the ownership? Mark Davis says he's supposed to be in charge of strategy, and we've veered wildly from one manager to a completely different one and back again in 3 months, well, less than that, in fact. Many expensive new signings yet to prove themselves, and if he wasn't responsible for these decisions, what's he doing here anyway? One from Giuseppe Timone. Easy to point a finger at anyone when things aren't going well, but do we really know what his job is? What's expected of him? Has he done as asked? Where has he fallen short? Interesting to hear, indeed. Russ says, no, I don't think so. He signed some top-class players. The past two managers haven't been able to find their best team. I think Deitch will and use the talent at his disposal. Edu has done his job, in my opinion. And then one final one from Twitter. Robin says, no one knows as we don't know what his role is or what conversations have been had. Any finger pointing is based on assumption with no direct knowledge, which our Twitterati are very good at. So a bit of a flavour from Twitter there. And a lot of people talking, Raf, about Edu and not quite sure what his role is. The club came out when Deitch was hired and were very specific that Edu had been a driving force in that recruitment process along with George Sirianos. So very, very clearly putting the Deitch appointment on Edu. But go back to the question, bearing in mind where we were with Nuno, and bearing in mind we know what's happened, is Edu Gaspar the biggest backfire in recent memory?
It's a good question. And this is where it's really, really difficult to make comment because we have such a limited amount of the required information to be able to pass an informed judgment. So things that we're saying are not informed by any stretch. We're just taking a punt effectively and going off of quite a lot of hearsay. Now, if we're doing hearsay, for example, apparently Edu wanted Mancini. And I think it's been well documented of how much that would have been probably, but again, we don't know, a disaster given his personality and how that would have exploded things internally. But if we take a step back, what do we know about Edu? So he was brought in to effectively oversee football operations across the whole multi-club organisation, the MCO, right? So he was to do that. Now, what's come out of what we've been told and seems fair enough is the fact that he's been put into a role which effectively assumes a larger amount and a very controlling part of recruitment strategy. Now, prior to him being in, Nuno was in all of those conversations and was a key part of who they recruited. And his line of comms apparently went pretty much up to Marinakis at that time. So one of the reasons why Nuno apparently felt so marginalised was he didn't have that line of comms with Marinakis so much anymore. And Edu was coming in to do that role. So Nuno's role moved from what is more like a manager to that phrase of head coach, right? Where you basically just coach the players that you're given rather than picking the players you do as a manager. It's not as simple as that, but in layman's terms, pretty much that. So is that Edu's fault? Well, Edu came in to do the job that he was told to do. So a lot of the breakdown that we see, and I do think there's some questions that we've got, you can go, is it Edu's fault? Or is it somewhere collectively in Marinakis, Edu, and everyone at that top governance level's fault? Because you go through, right? Nuno being giving you a new contract when we know that Edu's coming in and job roles are fundamentally changing like I've just explained them, right? That in itself seems like an own goal. You've got then Edu and Nuno that think it's now pretty well established they did not get on whatsoever, and top level governance didn't sort that out. And if they thought it couldn't sort it out, why did they give them 3 games at the beginning of the season? Another massive fail, right? So then you've got 2 fails in there. One, not sorting it out, and then when not sorting it out, giving him 3 games. Then changing the style slowly, which we've seen from Dan's really good graphics of where we've been kind of early in the season. Some of that was actually Nuno, of the possession that we had against Brentford and how we played and everything else as well. Slow change with a manager that we know migrating away from basically parking the bus and countering. Okay. But to then suddenly get in Ange is just absolute lunacy to try and change something over so quickly. But again, was that Edu? Sounds like it's a Marinakis mate type of appointment, right? So is that Edu again? Don't really know. But again, it's a failing of top governance. And then also, if Ange is basically walking, why was he given the Chelsea game when we could have gone and got Dyche, who wasn't in a job in at the beginning of the international break, right? So in there are 5 failures that I don't really put that much on Edu, but it's a collective governance fail that's there. But look at what Edu has done. He brought in, supposedly, allegedly, Louise was his choice. Amari Hutchison was his choice. Louise is probably, when fit, our best player that we have. He is elite, and he has been brought into the club, and he's now being paid. And when he plays,
Elliot Anderson would like a word.
Yeah, I know he would. That's my own personal opinion. They are our 2 elite players, basically, in midfield. So we've now got an elite partner for Elliot Anderson in that midfield. And for me, Amari Hutchison is about to explode for our team. When we get structure, I'm the most excited of all of the wing options that we have about Amari Hutchison. I think he's going to be absolutely brilliant. So when you have a look at it, of what he's been done, I think it's actually okay. I think it's just a failure of bringing in someone and not sorting the corporate structure and getting everyone on board. But I will counter to say to what you said, Greg, at the beginning. Would we all be very cushy right now if he never came in and we just carried on with Nuno doing what we were doing? And, you know, the first 2 games looked pretty good under Nuno, even though he wasn't even that happy. What I would say is that the opportunity to bring in players like Louise comes from having Edu in place. Could we have gone another season of solidified where we were without causing this upset? Potentially, yes. Edu is required, and the structure is required when we become stable top 8. But we are now going through growing pains and it not being managed very well, of Edu being put into a structure, or him having too much influence at Forest and not focusing on Olympiacos, Rayo Ave, and the other teams as well. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble there. There's quite a lot in there to unpack as what is maybe looks like quite a simple question.
No, not at all. That's the kind of answer we were hoping for. Dan, is it symptomatic of Marinakis and his failings when Nottingham Forest, who come up from the Championship after so long being out of the top flight, you know, we really rode our luck in season 1 and season 2 back in the Prem. We know all about that. But ultimately, we rolled the dice with the amount of players we signed, and it worked. It paid off. We ended up with a points deduction, and we rode that, and we stayed up. And then in season 3, what am I trying to say? Out of the blue, we end up finishing 7th when we could have finished top 3. We have the season of all seasons. And is it that's turned Marinakis' head away from actually a sensible through line? When you have a pathway in front of you that says we're going to build, we're going to establish ourselves, we're going to incrementally get better and become more established. When you have a stellar season like that, is it easy to kind of maybe for Marinakis to kind of have his head turned towards the glitz and the glamour of winning something and being part of the Big Six? And what I'm trying to get at is, was that the driving force that made him go after Edu? And he thought, you know what, we're here already. We've cracked the top 6 cartel. We're going to be in the Champions League. I need someone now who's going to match my ambitions. I might have gone after an Edu type character in a year or 2, but I'm going to go and get him now. So therefore, was it too much too soon when we weren't really established? We weren't really the team that's going to be finishing top 6 year after year. It was a one-off season. And actually, would it not have been better to say, you know what, let's just keep things as they are. Nuno's got us here. I need him to now execute the second part of his plan. Getting into Europe is part 1. Being in Europe with Nuno and his philosophy and how we play is part 2. So therefore, bringing Edu in when he did, is that the biggest backfire in recent memory?
I don't think it's just Forest, is it? Because it's a global appointment, I think it's on the back of Olympiacos' success in the Conference League as well. And it's that's obviously, and I get that from Marinakis, is that overall he wants to find a way to bring people in who are, you know, capable of organizing a group of clubs and a scouting network and the contacts and everything you need for that to try and bring them all up a level. I feel like appointing someone like Edu should not have this impact on any club. If you do it right and if you get the right person, it shouldn't be the difference between we did it this way and now we're going to completely 180 and do it this way, right? That shouldn't be the process ever. Like the comparison shouldn't be, should we have done okay this season and should we kind of potentially get relegated? Like, it should be somewhere in between. It should be kind of a smooth, seamless change that we don't really notice. And I remember when we talked about appointing him, it was kind of like, well, actually, I assume he won't have that much to do with Forest because Forest's in a good place. So why would he come and deal with Forest first? Why not go to Rio Ave and say, right, they need to be competing for the title in Portugal. So I'm going to spend most of my time there implementing what works to get them up a level, and then some time at Olympiacos to try and get them up a level. And in the meantime, Forest seems in a good place, so let's leave that, and you know, I'll focus on them. The fact that he seems to be at the training ground at Forest and all that surprised me, right? I wouldn't have thought that was his role and his job. And then when you look at the other stuff going off in the background with Ross Wilson leaving and all that, you kind of think, well, maybe it's to cover that. And, you know, there's other things going off there. But for me, it should be an appointment we didn't really notice. It should have been something for Marinakis to deal with elsewhere. You know, there's just a lot of decisions this summer like that for me, yeah, why would you have your best season in 30 years and then change everything that you're doing? It just makes no sense when you've spent so long getting to that point. That should be done after this season when you've consolidated your position. And I think that starts with maybe the Edu impact is that it delayed our transfer business, regardless of which transfers he wanted to do. The delay in the transfer business has killed us. Like the fullbacks and the fitness and the players that don't really know their role in the squad, that has killed us. And I know people will point to Cass, but I almost feel like that delay was because Ange would only come and manage Forest if we were in the Europa League, not in the Conference League. And we sort of didn't want to sign players for one manager and then potentially change manager and sign a load of new players. So we were waiting until it got to the point where it was like, well, actually, Ange is going to come in here. So we'll sign players like Zinchenko and players that suit his style of play because Marinakis wanted Ange as the manager. I don't really put that on Edu. I can't imagine. It makes no sense for Edu to want Ange on one hand and then also want Sean Dyche as the next guy on another hand, which is what we're being told. Like nothing makes sense, and it's been like that all summer. Nothing quite adds up to what you would expect a stable club like a Brighton or a Bournemouth or a Brentford to do. We're going down the chaos route, and unfortunately that's the results you end up with. And there's other stuff as well. There'll be agents involved and agent battles and. You know, there's big money in football, right? There's big money. That's potentially why Edu's at Forest, is because the big money is at Forest to get involved with. It's not really out of the Portuguese league, right? And then agents get involved and people do deals and all that. There's so much going on, and it's not always just about the football.
Okay, thanks very much, guys. Any person coming in at that level, you want it to be as seamless as possible, but it's been anything but. A bit of friction you can expect, but it's been a rocky transition. And I also think as well that sometimes when you do try and make a bit of an overhaul for the better, sometimes you do go through a bit of a rough patch, and it's been that, to say the very least. And so we focus back on Saturday. We're going to round off this episode with our usual score predictions. Raf, I'll come to you first. Any closing thoughts on the match, and what's your score prediction?
Right, come on, Raf, let's be optimistic. We grab a 2-1 win.
Oh, okay.
That's my heart saying 2-1. My head says we lose 2-1, but my heart says we win 2-1.
Okay, we're listening to your heart today.
Yeah.
Dan, what do you reckon? Ange Posferati?
I think we go for a 1-0 win, Mike. That's what we're aiming for. That's it. I think if they score one, we struggle to win it. I do feel like we'll struggle to score two. So hopefully a 1-0 win. And I didn't do the lineup bit, but I feel like that 4-1-4-1, it gives you the option to exploit the space they leave. You know, like sometimes they get very one-sided and there's big spaces, and that's what we need. You need to pick and shoot. You don't know where the space is going to be, so you need to have the options. And I think having someone like Gibbs White out wide he can float in and find the space and all that.
Okay.
That's where we got to. Like
Yeah.
in the end, anyway.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna say 2-0. I think, you know, we're at home. I think that week with the players, I'm believing that that's going to have been transformational. And I believe that set pieces have been worked on. And whilst we conceded direct from a corner against Bournemouth, Dan, you are right. We dealt with anything else that was set piecey against Bournemouth pretty well. And I think that will continue. So I'm expecting a 2-0 win. I'm not quite sure it's going to happen. No. Kind of how I'm feeling maybe about it as well. That's the end of the road today, guys. Next 5 are Man United at home, Sturm Graz away, Leeds at home, Liverpool away, Malmo at home. The game's going to come thick and fast, and we need to get points on the board in the Premier League. And the teams that we are now facing in the Europa are possibly more favourable. Maybe a bit of rotation in our squad will be seen on those Thursday nights. But it's points on the board that we need in the Premier League for Sean Dyche and these men in the blood red on this Halloween special. Thank you for joining us on this ghastly one, folks. We'll see you soon.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Dark.